Well, not so long ago, U.S. President Donald Trump said he wasn't aware that Germany was having an election, but since then he's been educated on that, and today he congratulated the winning conservatives and described the election as a great day for Germany. I'm joined now from Washington by our correspondent Benjamin Alvarez-Gruber. Benjamin, good to see you. So how is this being seen in the U.S. now that the U.S. president knows what's happening?
That's right, and he says it's highly anticipated. But a couple of days ago, when he was asked in the White House, he had to ask again, what are the elections that are taking place on Sunday? Well, they told him that they would be the German elections. He wished them luck, saying we have enough problems here. He reacted as the first reaction here from Washington on his Truth Social post in all caps statement. I will just read one part of it. He said, much like the USA, the people of Germany got tired of the no common sense agenda, a term that we're hearing over and over from this new administration, especially on energy and immigration, that has prevailed for so many years. This is a great day for Germany and also a great day for the United States. So that's the first reaction that we have here from Washington, that of course is closely following the elections in Germany. We can expect to hear more from the White House and also from the State Department tomorrow.
So U.S. President Trump, he seems pleased. How much does he have in common with the man who will most likely be the next chancellor, Friedrich Merz?
So as we just heard in that report, Friedrich Merz made a fortune as a lawyer. He leading BlackRock in Germany, so that might be something that made it easier for him to talk to Trump. But as we also just heard, he will need to make compromises, not just to form this coalition, to form this government that he also said should be in place as soon as possible for this leading role. That's also something that might make a lot of sense for Donald Trump, who said that he wants to put the United States from a sleepy role to a really leading role, this America First policy. But it is always different, and we have to see what will happen actually when they meet, when they have this first conversation. We know that there are many European leaders eager to talk to Trump as quickly as possible, to present themselves, also as type of a mediator when it comes to the war in Ukraine. Trump met with the president of Poland yesterday at CPEC, the first European leader. Next week, he will meet with Emmanuel Macron from France and also Keir Starmer from the United Kingdom. So we can imagine that probably Friedrich Merz might be here in Washington too, but it's different to hear what the reactions are right now, saying that they will lead in those conversations, and also what the output will be of those conversations here on the ground in the United States.
And Benjamin, this is an election that took place for the first time that any of us can remember, when the future of the transatlantic relationship has been questioned, and people are actually wondering, can the United States still be seen as an ally of Germany? What's the view from where you are?
That's right, and I think that many actually realized that only when Vice President J.D. Vance spoke at the Munich Security Conference, in that really remarkable speech that raised a lot of eyebrows, or even more than that in Europe, not so much here. But that's the big question, how the cooperation will continue, not only with Germany, but also with Europe. Many of high-ranking officials from the U.S. administration have been there. Defense Secretary Hegseth, who was in Brussels, also had different meetings there. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So it remains to be seen how the relationship will continue. Also, when we look at the negotiations and the U.S. talking to Russia without including Europeans and not even leaving the option open that they might also have a seat at the table. But what's also really remarkable here is not just the role that President Trump is playing here, but especially what Elon Musk, the role that he has been playing, being really close with Alice Weidel, the head of the far-right AfD party. He has been tweeting his support for the AfD, not only in the last couple of days and only recently. He quoted a video of Björn Höcke, that we can say it's one of the most radical members of the AFD party. He was fined twice for using a Nazi slogan. He can legally be called a fascist, and there was a video that Elon Musk quoted and posted. He has been retweeting a lot from the AFD party convention, so that's definitely also something that led to criticism from many senior members, Friedrich Merz, the likely new chancellor, but also from Robert Habeck, who repeated it recently, saying that the Trump administration is attacking what he called the Western values.
Our correspondent Benjamin Alvarez Gruber with the latest from Washington. Benjamin, thank you. And our coverage continues now. We want to go for the European view on this election. Let's go to Brussels now. My colleague Rosie Burchard is standing by. Good evening to you, Rosie. I know we've got some reaction coming from European leaders. What have we heard?
So indeed, we've had some European leaders already taking to social media to congratulate Friedrich Merz. We've had that, for example, from the Cypriot president, who says that it's an important victory at a crucial moment for Europe. And we've had the Finnish prime minister saying, congratulating Friedrich Merz and saying that this is something which is a strong Germany, he says, is essential for a strong Europe. And let me tell you, that has been the reaction I've heard from diplomats in general over these last few years when we've had difficulties within the German coalition having an impact here in Brussels. I've heard frustration from EU diplomats from other countries saying when they can't see what Germany's policy is going to be in a certain issue, it's hard to set a line here in Brussels. That's been the case, for example, when it comes to European Union policy on China. But we've also had instances of German coalition politics, meaning that some European policies, for example, on that key issue of combustion engine cars being unpicked or some backtracking. So there is a desire here in Europe to have a clearer line on what the future of Germany's politics will be. Of course, we don't have exact clarity yet. These election results just coming in now. But there's also another big issue here in Europe, perhaps the biggest one. Look at those flags behind me. That's the European Commission headquarters, but there are also flags there of Ukraine. That's because we're approaching this key anniversary of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. President Trump across the Atlantic has sent shockwaves through Brussels and other capitals across the European Union, and there's been a real sense that there needs to be a total rethink of how the European Union approaches Ukraine, approaches its support to Ukraine. And over the last few days, there have been huddles of all sorts of different leaders putting their heads together to try and come up with new ideas, how to boost defence spending, how to double down on backing for Ukraine. But the fact is, I've heard some diplomats saying, look, it just seems like there's the wrong man in the room, because they've had Olaf Scholz there representing Germany, and there was the widespread expectation that he would be on his way out.
Well, Rosie, do they feel like Friedrich Merz will be the right man in the room now when they're talking about EU policy and stance towards Ukraine?
Look, I think there's a sense that Friedrich Merz has spelled out he wants to continue to be a strong backer of Ukraine, and I think that's something that will be welcomed across the European Union. But there's other policy areas which this will likely have an impact on. Look at the rightward shift that we're seeing in general across this bloc. We saw that reflected in European parliamentary elections back in 2024. So we can expect perhaps the continuation of a push for a more restrictive migration policy. Also a push we've been seeing here in Brussels in general toward deregulation, toward cutting red tape to try and boost the European Union's competitiveness when it comes to competing with bigger powers like China or the United States. And that puts some, especially climate campaigners, in a position of fear. They fear for the future of the European Union's so-called Green Deal, its big green climate promises. But of course, on the other side of the argument, there's those who say simply that Europe has got too much bureaucracy if it wants to stand on its own 2 feet.
DW's Rosie Burchard with the latest from Brussels tonight. Rosie, thank you. Well, German support for Ukraine has also helped to shape the election, as we were saying, just days after Russia's invasion back in February 2022. Chancellor Olaf Scholz told Parliament the war marked a turning point. Germany cut many commercial ties with Russia, notably ending direct imports of Russian natural gas. And since then, German support has grown significantly. The government says It has so far provided or committed for future years around 28 billion euros in military assistance for Ukraine. That involves weapons and military hardware, including 18 Leopard 2A6 main battle tanks with ammunition and spare parts, 25 self-prepared howitzers and the Panzer Haubitze 2000, and 11 Iris air defense systems. But despite the U.S., UK, and France supplying longer-range weapons, the Chancellor has refused to provide Ukraine with German-made Taurus cruise missiles. And following explosive remarks by members of the Trump administration, Chancellor Scholz joined an emergency European summit in Paris. Leaders insisted on having a place at the table when the U.S. and Russia discuss ending the war in Ukraine. Both Moscow and Washington have said there is no role for Europe in the talks. No role for Europe. If you're just joining us, this is our continuing coverage of the German elections. Our chief international editor, Richard Walker, is to my left. To my right is Christine Munwa. She's got the numbers for us. And to my far right is Benjamin Tallis with the Democratic Strategy Initiative. So let me ask you, Ben, what about a place at the table? Is the new German chancellor with a new government, is he going to be able to get a place at the table?
Well, let's be clear about one thing, Brent. No one's going to give Europe a place at the table. We have to earn it, we have to deserve it, we have to grab it. And so that depends on what Friedrich Merz is actually going to do. Now, Merz does seem to understand the gravity of the situation. As mentioned, we don't know if we can rely on the US security guarantee anymore, which is why on Friday we heard Friedrich Merz talk about the possibility of nuclear weapons in Europe and about rethinking Europe's nuclear deterrence. That's a strong signal to be sending, but it'll need to be backed up in reality.
But let's let that sink in. So we're talking about Germany talking about arming itself with nuclear weapons.
That's the implication behind it. It wasn't said in as many words, but now that the election's done, I think we can expect to hear a lot more talk about that. Why? Because we need full-spectrum deterrence. We face an enemy in Russia, and let's call it what it is, an enemy that is threatening us. We've lost the reliability of our major security guarantor, so we have to be able to defend ourselves, and that means all the way up. And it doesn't mean those kind of numbers which were of support was sent to Ukraine, we just saw, which for a country of Germany's size, many people think was actually quite poor. And Germany, remember, was behind 10 other countries in Europe on percentage of GDP in support to Ukraine.
So, Richard, I mean, we've never talked really that much about a nuclear Germany before.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, I'm not sure everybody would have interpreted that from what Merz was saying. So Merz appeared in a TV program and he said that he would definitely need to be talking to the Brits and to the French about potentially sharing their nuclear weapons in the way that, for instance, Germany is part of a sharing agreement with the United States with its nuclear weapons.
That's technically not possible with the nuclear weapons France has. It's a very different type of arrangement. So this is why it implies a different kind of deterrent being provided.
Yeah, but so he mentioned sharing, and that he also mentioned, you know, the extent of the deterrent. So, I mean, given those kind of contradictions, we don't know exactly, but I mean, this conversation is going to probably start. I mean, interestingly enough, in the AfD, there are people who say that Germany should have its own nuclear weapons, you know?
Behind the scenes in Munich, there were even Green Party politicians talking about this, about the need to talk seriously with the German people about it. Now, that is a change.
But if you're thinking about the things that would kind of be a challenge to taboos in Germany, well, this would be...
Huge, right?
This is a jumbo one, you know? Given, you know, the international commitments that Germany has, you know, as part of the various international agreements that regulate these things. But you are also, and this is kind of knock-on effect of what we're seeing coming out of the Trump administration, is that is also going to fuel similar conversations elsewhere in the world. South Korea, Japan.
That's right.
You know, South Korea, there was already a bubbling conversation about that. You know, so you're seeing ripple effects of people looking at what the Trump administration is saying, like American allies in Europe, in Asia, and thinking, oh, okay, what does that mean? And if this taboo explodes, what about that taboo? And so So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to follow that, because this is it. I mean, there are some hot potatoes out there.
Yeah,
This is about as hot as they get.
This is about as hot as it gets. But we have had people in this studio at this table in the past years say that maybe Germany should look at Ukraine. Ukraine once had nuclear weapons as well. They gave them up. They thought they had security guarantees. You see what kind of security guarantees they have today. So the lesson has been maybe Germany should consider not becoming another Ukraine when it comes to being able to defend yourself.
100%, but for that to happen, you need a full range of deterrent options. You don't just need nuclear weapons and a couple of tanks. You need everything in the middle. And actually, this is where Germany has a potential advantage because of the emerging defence technology industry here in Germany, which is one of its real strengths. Down in Bavaria in particular, there are a lot of companies at the Munich Security Conference presenting on this. This is something I think we can expect to see more of because they could rapidly increase German combat power and they could help give Germany the economic boost that Friedrich Merz needs to provide.
I mean, this is one of the kind of striking things about the situation now, that Germany is facing a risk of deindustrialization that is much discussed with respect to its car industry, its chemicals industry. And yet, what it needs is a bigger defence industry.
And these are skilled jobs as well. These are good jobs that would be there, which could transfer from one to another.
So this is almost like one of the thoughts that this new government is going to be confronted with is like, OK, can they kind of like flip over an industrial base that is designed for making cars that people don't necessarily want anymore to making weapons that Germany desperately needs and the rest of Europe
weapons the Russians don't want to see, right?
Yeah.
But this it feels like maybe this is the logical result if you're losing the nuclear protection umbrella of the United States. But that's not always the way Europe and the Germans thought that umbrella would be removed, right? The thinking was that if you never needed it, then there wouldn't be a threat. But now we're looking at there is a threat, and the Americans may not be with us anymore.
Exactly. The Beach Boys School of Security Studies no longer lives. The wouldn't it be nice world that we were in yesterday isn't there. And thankfully, a lot of German politicians have woken up to that. What we've not yet seen is that realisation translated into real action because the Zeitenwende of Olaf Scholz, which was supposed to reposition Germany in this way, failed across all its 5 main dimensions. Merz's government now has to deliver a real Zeitenwende, including through its commitments to allies.
That's a big task.
And actually, we have a question on that point from one of our viewers who wants to know, will Germany now take a tougher stance against Russia, try to negotiate a deal for both NATO and Ukraine?
Well, we can certainly hope Germany takes a tougher stance against Russia, and there's a lot of people around Europe who will be wanting that because Germany, frankly, has been missing in action for a good period of time in European security and defence. We heard earlier about the report from Brussels with Olaf Scholz, the wrong man in the wrong job at the wrong time, who became something of an unconstructive blocker. Merz has a chance to change that, but to do it, he has to act as well as talk. Part of that is shoring up Germany's commitment in the Baltic states, where they deployed a full brigade to Lithuania, which is in process, due to be finished by 2027. That's already stretching the Bundeswehr to its limits, though. And so the Bundeswehr has to grow across the board. But the quickest shortcut to getting all of this right is winning in Ukraine. So does Merz have the courage to actually take a winning position in Ukraine, which is something that Olaf Scholz was never willing to do?
Does he have the electoral support to take Germany to the next level?
Well, yeah, it's hard to understand that question, to answer that question, really, because, of course, his Conservative Party won this by a significant margin, but it's their second worst result ever. 28.65%, the current projections. Yeah. It's not a lot. They're likely to be creating a coalition either with one party that has lost a huge amount of its support, the Social Democrats, losing an election but ending up in government, or potentially with 2 parties, depending on how the coalition maths shakes up. So it's maybe just too hard to answer that question. But I would agree with what Ben said.
You've got to say, right, do what you can with what you have where you are. And that's part of leadership. And that's what we've got Merz for, isn't it?
Yeah, but we just don't know yet how strong his position is going to be, I think, and to what extent he's going to be buffeted around by events, and events in the human form of Donald Trump.
Yeah, beyond his control.
And I think there's a very strong sense of that Europe is being blown around at the moment by Trump force gales.
Yeah.
And Merz is about to be in the middle of that. And a lot of Europeans are looking to Germany to lead. I was in Munich as well, and there were people, you know, even British people, like members of the British Parliament, standing up and saying, when is German leadership going to come? And Merz is signalling that's what he wants to do. But the question is, when he's in a coalition with a potentially difficult partner, when he's dealing with countries around him that have potentially slightly different interests or emphasis on interests, you know, all in theory, you can say, I'm serious about this, I'm serious about it. But it's in the doing that is the test of it. And we just don't know yet. And we don't know what how difficult the circumstances are going to be for him.